This is Ayushi Sharma, and I have my colleague Ketki from the Privacy and Data Protection Practice at Economic Laws Practice. For those of you who are new here, the Privacy and Data Practice team at ELP has an ongoing DPDP primer series where we discuss practical aspects and challenges which businesses can possibly face in the run up to the DPDP Act coming into force. As many of you would know, the DPDP Act and the accompanying rules were notified in November 2025 and will become fully operational starting May 13, 2027. With the clock ticking, businesses across sectors need to get into implementation mode, working towards ensuring full compliance under the DPDP framework. The DPDP regime puts an individual or a data principal at the front and center, and any discussion on its framework is incomplete without delving into their rights. So far, discussions have largely focused on the core obligations, especially on seeking consent and issuing of notices. Today, we are shifting the spotlight to a critical and often less discussed requirement, the grievance redressal mechanism. In this podcast, we'll break down what the law requires and explore key considerations that businesses may think through in designing and implementing these systems.
Thanks, Ayushi. Before we get into the need for a grievance redressal mechanism, let's learn about how an individual can address her concerns or exercise her rights under the DPDP framework. And yes, a small but refreshing detail. The DPDP Act consistently uses she to refer to the individual. So every data principal, she, has the right to raise concerns and exercise her rights. Now diving straight into our topic for the day, the grievance redressal process. So the grievance redressal process at its core is fairly straightforward. An individual can approach a data fiduciary, someone who handles your personal data, or a consent manager in two key situations. First, if she has a concern or complaint about how her personal data is being handled. And second, if she wants to exercise a legal right, like asking for a summary of her personal data that is being processed by the fiduciary. Ayushi, can you take us through the grievance redressal obligations of data fiduciaries and consent managers now?
Right. So, if individuals have been given the right to raise concerns and exercise their rights, it has been equally ensured by the statute that they are actually able to do so with ease. This is where the data fiduciary and consent manager obligations kick in. Data fiduciaries and consent managers need to put in place clear, accessible grievance redressal mechanisms which provide a simple, straightforward way for data principals to raise complaints or make requests about their personal data. Because ultimately, the purpose of the statute is for individuals' rights to be real and not only theoretical, which can only be possible if these mechanisms are easy to use. So, in this background, Kirti, why don't we discuss how should data fiduciaries make sure people actually know about their respective grievance redressal mechanisms?
Sure. So like Ayushi already mentioned, making grievance redressal easy is at the front and center. Therefore, data principals should be able to easily understand and use this mechanism so they can actually exercise their rights. This means prominently putting a link to the mechanism on each of the platforms the fiduciary runs, say an app or a website. At the time of providing a notice and seeking consent to process an individual's personal data, this notice is also required to include a clear grievance redressal link or pathway so that individuals know exactly how to raise a complaint or exercise their rights, including approaching the Data Protection Board of India if needed. Because ultimately, access to a grievance redressal mechanism is not merely about the existence of such a mechanism, but equally about its visibility, effectiveness, and ease of access and use. So now that we've laid out an overview of people's rights and a fiduciary's corresponding obligation, let's hear Ayushi on what happens once an individual complains or makes a request to exercise her rights.
So, like we just discussed, the first step would be for the individual to approach the data fiduciary itself through the grievance redressal mechanism that's been made available by the fiduciary. Now, the law says that complaints must be responded to within 90 days. But here's the catch: it's not fully clear what responded to really means. Does it mean simply acknowledging the complaint or completely resolving it within this time frame? And this is an area which would hopefully see more clarity as the law evolves and has more practical implementation. Now, once a complaint has been made, and if there is no satisfactory resolution by the data fiduciary, the individual can take the next step of approaching the Data Protection Board of India. But importantly, a person cannot go straight to the board, and the person would have to first exhaust the grievance redressal means that are made available by the fiduciary. So, in a nutshell, the law does give a first opportunity to data fiduciaries to fix an issue before it can be escalated to the board. So now that we've discussed the flow of complaints, how they may be addressed, let's talk about some of the key factors that data fiduciaries can consider in formulating and implementing their grievance redressal systems. So, Ketki, simply put, what would be something that data fiduciaries would have to do to make sure their system is actually effective?
So, because the law has a clear fix it first approach, that is, giving fiduciaries the first chance to resolve complaints, it puts a premium on how well grievance systems are designed. The law requires businesses to put in place appropriate technical and organizational measures to make these systems effective. But it does not set out what these would actually look like in practice. So, right now, there's a fair amount of ambiguity around what would be good enough for a system to be called effective. That said, we can extrapolate the building blocks of these systems that businesses must think of. From an organizational POV, some of these system elements could be like systems to raise complaint tickets and case management systems to log and track complaints, clearly define internal SOPs for handling grievances, say what different teams are supposed to do to action a complaint, have automated reminders and escalation triggers in place to avoid delays, have clear and well-defined roles and responsibilities in case of escalations, maintaining of audit trails of complaints and corresponding actions taken. But here's a key thing to bear in mind. There is no one-size-fits-all solution. So businesses will have to think through design and implementation, probably consult with external legal and technical experts, and factor in the nature of their operations, complexity, and data mapping. Because ultimately, effectiveness is about having systems that deliver. Now, Ayushi, can we talk about from a business POV, why is it important to make sure that I have a seamless and efficient grievance redressal system in place? We all understand this is something that the law requires me to have in place, but what is the actual benefit of ensuring that this isn't just a post box mechanism?
So I think this is a very critical question from a business perspective, and there are two lenses to look at this from. The first is going to be the pure legal compliance perspective, and the second is a broader governance mindset. On the legal compliance side, like we've just discussed, the law does require businesses to have an effective grievance redressal mechanism, which shouldn't just be a tick box exercise. Let's bring this out with a simple illustration. An individual complains that her personal data has been used for a purpose that was not consented to. The business will review the complaint, investigate it, and close it. But she isn't satisfied with the outcome, so she escalates it to the board. This is where the effectiveness of the system will really come into play. Now, once the matter reaches the board can proceed with an inquiry if there are sufficient grounds to examine the complaint. And we will be seeing a fair number of escalations to the board. And when that does happen, a business will have to show two things. One, the complaint was appropriately handled. And more broadly, there was overall compliance with the DPDP Act. Now, this takes us to the second point, which is governance. While grievance redressal is reactive, strong data governance is proactive. At the end of the day, individuals have every right to question how their data is being used and to escalate concerns if they're not satisfied. But for a business to be able to defend itself against a complaint, it will have to fall back on showing that its actions were compliant with the DPDP framework. Now, let's think about what we've just discussed with an example. A customer complains that her data was used, say, for marketing messages that she never signed up for. The business looks into the complaint, checks it internally, determines that consent was validly obtained, and then closes the complaint. The customer isn't convinced with the outcome, so she escalates this to the regulator. Before the DPBI now, this is not going to be just about did we handle and respond to this complaint properly. It will also become about can we show clearly, end to end, that there was valid consent, the systems recorded the consent correctly, and the consent was never withdrawn, and processes essentially worked as they were supposed to. If before the DPBI, the business is unable to show this end to end compliance, then the issue will travel beyond the complaint and the entire credibility of the business's compliance will be called into question. So let's think of grievance redressal really as firefighting. A complaint comes in, that's the fire. The business responds, investigates, and tries to put out the fire. But the overall governance is really the fire prevention system, the alarms, the sprinklers, the building design. And if the fire prevention system is strong, the occasional fire may still break out, but you can clearly show that it was an exception, not a systemic failure. Now that we've discussed some of these important aspects about grievance redressal systems, as a business readying itself for compliance with the DPDP framework, Ketki, can you give us some key takeaways that we should think about for a good grievance redressal system?
Sure. So, to sum up, grievance redressal systems should not be put on the back burner or treated as a mere checkbox. Like we've discussed, along with implementing this mechanism, a business should continue to focus on its compliance and overall governance, making sure the personal data journey aligns with the DPDP compliance requirements from the very beginning. Given the practical ambiguities around what effectiveness really means, this is something businesses should start thinking about early on, having those critical internal conversations, and where needed, even engaging with external legal and technical experts to sense check whether their approach will actually hold up, not just internally, but also under a potential regulatory scrutiny. Thank you for listening in today. We hope this discussion has sparked some ideas, and if you'd like to dive deeper, we are here to help.